Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So nice to see everybody here today and get in a little bit of meditation. It was kind of nice to do the no talking one for a little bit. Oftentimes when there's newer people, we go for like a longer guided meditation, but I think you guys probably have meditated before. And so actually in the forest monasteries, there's often no talking at all. You kind of just, you just go there and don't say anything, and then somebody rings the bell, and then they ring it at the end, and that's it. And kind of alone there with one's own mind. It's kind of very nice. It kind of can be very peaceful and relaxing, especially in the outside environment. It's also very kind of quiet, which is one of the kind of benefits of it being kind of winter. It gets very, very quiet. So remember, I'm guessing you guys have been to forest monasteries, visited them, yeah. And they have these kind of winter retreats in the ones in the west. And it's a kind of very nice time. So from, I think they're on it right now, from January till March, they kind of shut down the monastery externally, and all the monks in the monastery get to have 3 months of retreat. And it's kind of very nice. It's kind of, out in the forest, there's nothing around. And the winter is actually a very quiet time. Kind of one of the really interesting things, when you go on retreat in a forest, in the jungle, it's actually very loud. You wouldn't expect it, but they have these cicadas, these ones that go, when I first went to kind of real jungle once, I heard these cicadas. It was like almost deafening. They get so loud. There's so many of them, So it's actually it can be very noisy. Not that it makes it impossible to meditate. But here in Canada, we have this kind of very nice opportunity, because when it snows, it actually muffles everything. So everything outside gets very muffled. Even kind of walking in the snow, the sounds of a person's footsteps get muffled. And then when one goes out to a kind of a countryside in a setting like this, then everything around is quiet. There's almost no animals even around. Actually, there's mice that kind of run under the snow, but you don't see their tunnels till the winter's over. And then each monk in these places has their own kind of individual, what they call kutis, these kind of cabins. And you stay in this kind of cabin, and then once you go back there, that's it. There's kind of just nothing there. It's kind of a very quiet, and there's just the sound of the heater. And so this external environment has an influence on a person's mind. Kind of, when the external environment is very noisy, very distracting, then a person's mind kind of rushes out to that noise, to that distraction. And if you want to avoid this kind of noise, this kind of distraction, you have to kind of forcibly make an effort to go against the grain. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to do. It just means that you're going against the grain of kind of what's going on. You kind of have to basically make an effort to resist. But one of the interesting things is that when you go out to a kind of a country location, kind of out in the forest, then there's nothing to distract. Kind of, you can only watch a squirrel for so much time. It's kind of not that interesting after a while. They're doing their usual thing. Sometimes deer walk by. There's some deer, And so the external environment there is kind of pushing people inwards. It kind of just pushes your mind inwards, so that there's actually only your kind of mind to be around. And this is a kind of ideal time, ideal kind of place, ideal kind of situation to practice in. When everything outside is very quiet, then one sits down and everything is moving one towards quiet. Everything's moving a person there. So here, oftentimes, if people haven't meditated a lot before, then don't do that. I tried doing it once at the meditation class here a while back, and I don't think there were some people I think had only meditated a few times. They didn't like it, so I got the feedback afterwards. Like I could follow my breath a lot easier when you were doing the guided meditation. But the nice thing about this is that as one continues to kind of meditate, one kind of gets a sense, it starts to kind of savor this feeling of quiet. It kind of starts to value this feeling of quiet. It's kind of oftentimes at the outset when one hasn't been meditating for a while, one especially hasn't meditated in a group situation. You go to these kind of forest monasteries, everything's all set up. You can't avoid the schedule. If you go there, you have to do everything that everybody else is doing. And after a while, you kind of fall into a rhythm of doing this. And then if you get used to that, then you can kind of go off on your own. That's actually even more of an opportunity because you don't have anything to restrain you. But you develop a kind of savor for this kind of sense of quiet. At first, when people sit down to meditate, the very first time they come to meditate, this quiet is a kind of scary thing. It's kind of just having kind of a silence around. Nothing much is around, nothing much is happening, and all of a sudden a person is faced with all these kind of thoughts that they had, that they didn't know they had. kind of sit down and things are quiet, and all of a sudden, a person is way back to when they were 10 years old, and that kid stole their kind of ice cream cone, and they hadn't thought about it for a while, but they're back there, and the kid's got their ice cream cone again. It's kind of like it's right happening, right now. Or kind of whatever problems might have happened in a person's day, in a person's week. Oftentimes people go back to their house and they turn on a TV, and this TV kind of distracts them with a lot of explosions. Sometimes as a monk, you kind of don't watch much TV. But then you'll be in a room or a house where people are watching TV, and it's like one explosion after another. Then there's like gunshots, and people are screaming. It's not usually like the sound of grasshoppers and crickets where people are, really happy and going through meadows. It's usually like a series of explosions happening. And these explosions are really loud, they're really deafening. They kind of distract people from their usual problems of their kind of working life, and kind of usual problems of their day. It goes away when they watch these explosions for a period of time. And so when they come down to meditate, these kind of explosions aren't there. All these problems are facing them. They're there right away. It's kind of like a person who has a room. And in their room, whenever something comes into the room, they just kind of chuck it to the side. Kind of pick something up in the room, and instead of putting it back in the proper place, they just chuck it away. Kind of have some coffee, they're drinking the coffee, the mug goes here, have some kind of chips, and they're eating the chips, the crumbs are going all over the floor. And after a while, the room starts to kind of smell. It kind of doesn't smell all that good. It kind of, doesn't look all that good. And so the tendency can be, instead of taking a vacuum and cleaning the room, picking up the coffee, putting everything back into the shelves, sometimes the tendency can be like, well, I've got an extra kind of blanket here, I'll just, put it over top of the coffee stain. Kind of remember when I was young, I was really curious about how cleaning things worked, and I spilled this hot chocolate on the rug. And I was like, well, I'm not going to clean it up, I'll just vacuum it later. That stain was there for until I left that house. It's for like 10 years, that stain was always there. When people kind of do this, they kind of throw something over the stain. They throw something over these things without cleaning it up. The room starts to smell. And you throw something over it, and at first it looks a bit cleaner. That's okay. Threw this kind of a sheet over the room, threw it over the floor, and the room looks cleaner. Excuse me. And so then the smell goes away for a bit. The mess goes away for a bit. But then a person's habits remain. So they start chucking more stuff around. More chips go on the floor. Whatever they're drinking goes around. Maybe they start kicking the mugs that are under the sheet and they spill. And after a while, the room starts to smell a lot. And they might kind of grab some more perfume, kind of spray it. But eventually, the day comes when the smell is overwhelming. And people kind of need to find a way to get rid of it. So then they come to ask advice. How do I get rid of this smell? And somebody says, well, you've got to pull the sheets out of your room and clean it up. And this is what it's like when people first come to meditate, because they have many things kicking around in their head, kind of many habits that go underground, many negative tendencies of mind that go underground. And the tendency for all these negative tendencies of mind is just to distract them away, kind of watch more explosions, you know? Actually, I was saying to the people went to visit TBC the other day, I was saying kind of the last movie I watched before I ordained was this movie, The Dark Knight, with the Joker. And the Joker was Heath Ledger. I think he died after playing the Joker. In that movie, he took on the role very seriously, which is actually quite sad. But he was very evil in this movie. You know, when I was young, the Joker was like, you know, he had a painted face and he had this like flower, and you know, maybe he would you know, do a few tricks and you know, like he maybe steal a few things. In this movie, he was downright evil, like, you know, doing the most evil, atrocious things you could imagine. And you know, you get distracted by that, because at the time you watched what the Joker did back, you know, when Batman came out in the 60s, and you know, he had this little flower. That's not going to distract anybody anymore. You know, the mess has gotten worse, so it needs a kind of stronger form of distraction. It needs more sheets to cover it up. You know? So in all these sheets covering up the mess that's going on, when people kind of distract themselves from the way that they're thinking, the way that they're directing their mind, this kind of smell starts to bubble up. And people go looking for a way to find help with this smell, find a way to get out of it. And so this is what often drives people to meditation. So when a person's been meditating for the first time, they sit down, they have all these thoughts. It's like removing the sheets in the room. Kind of what they see is a mess. Kind of looks really messy. And then the first thought is, I've got to clean this up. So a person learns to continually go back to their meditation object. You know, whatever negative thoughts happen in a person's mind, they learn to counter those thoughts. It's like cleaning up the mess. When a person spilled coffee on the floor, they learn how to get the coffee out. Actually, there's ways to do that. You can get kind of this borax, I think, and you know, vinegar. Look up ways on the internet. How do I get the stain out? Kind of rub it in with the kind of brush. You know, work it in there, and then let it sit. And then sometimes you can vacuum all that up. It kind of takes the stain away a bit. You know. Now there's ways to get rid of chip crumbs that have been matted into carpets. You know, sometimes you need to use a different strategy. Got to vacuum those chip crumbs up. You know, there's ways to get rid of things that have been spilled on the counter. You know, sometimes you have to use, you know, if it's a porcelain counter, you've got to use kind of maybe some scrubbing bubbles, which I really love. You kind of as an aside, I have a kind of you know, somehow I like cleaning things, so kind of this kind of weird interest. But you know, scrubbing bubbles is really amazing for kind of mold and mildew. You can scrub things away, you know, and it'll go. It's kind of the way to get rid of mold and mildew on porcelain counters, but you can't use it on floors. You know? And then there's other things too, like if you want to clean a toilet, there's things that clean that well. You can't use the toilet bowl cleaner and spray it all over the floor. That'll make a mess. So in the same way, when a person comes to meditate, they learn that there's these various messes that are in the mind, things that have been left there and that are still making messes. And there's various ways that one has to clean them up. Yeah? Can't just use the same method to clean everything. It doesn't work. It's like taking the scrubbing bubbles and spraying it all over the carpet, spraying it all over wood, spraying it all over tile. You spray scrubbing bubbles on the carpet, it actually will take the color out of your carpet. It bleaches it. You know? So then you have all these kind of bleach spots on your carpet. You spray it on wood, it'll damage the wood. You know? Same thing, you try to take what you're using to clean wood and clean your porcelain countertop with it, clean your toilet with it, it's not going to work well. Sometimes those things have stains in them that are used to clean wood-colored things and could stain your toilet bowl. So in the same way, when one sits down to meditate for the first time, learns all these methods, or sees all these messes, the teacher, the meditation instructor often says, look, there's a lot of different techniques for this. You know? A lot of different techniques that we're going to use. You know? But there are techniques, there are ways to clean these things up. You know? And there are ones that are generally good everywhere. Sweeping tends to be good just about everywhere. You can kind of sweep a carpet, you can sweep a floor. If you have the little broom, like a little hand broom, you can sweep off the mess from the top. You know? And in the same way, kind of breath meditation is a topic that's generally good to start with for everybody. It doesn't kind of, you know, really cause any more messes. It's not like you have to be all that technical. It doesn't get too dangerous. But it's a good way to start cleaning up the mess. So then when people come to meditation, we learn to do this kind of guided breath meditation as a kind of way to start. Learning the techniques of sweeping, or whatever. I mean, you can do it any time. It doesn't just have to be a beginner's thing. But then gradually learning these techniques, you learn there's different ways to move the brush. There's ways that are specific to each mess to sweep things out, even with this particular tool. So it's not just the case that you can go through all the motions all the time. Depending on the mess, have to learn how to flick things out. I actually remember learning this sweeping technique where you had to keep the broom straight up and down, and then always use it like that, not kind of pulling it to the side. And if you keep the broom like that, it gets stuff out of carpets. That's how you get things out of carpets with a broom. But if you pull it to the side, that may be good for hard floors, but it's not so good for carpets. So in other words, when one first comes to meditate, people learn these basic techniques, and they start sweeping out their room. Start learning how to get rid of the mess. And then on their own, as they continue to meditate, they learn, look, okay, I've gotten rid of these things that I can get rid of with sweeping. Is more sweeping going to be good? Is that going to get rid of all the mess that I've done? Maybe if it's only chips, maybe if it's only dust. But if there's stains, then people have to use other techniques. Hatred comes up. People learn to use metta. How to use metta. Where to use it. How to spread it. Jealousy comes up. People learn to use mudita. How to use mudita. Where to use mudita. How to spread it. Thoughts of kind of over-attachment come up. People learn to use upekkha. Learn to spread it. How to spread it. Where to spread it. All these various techniques. There's kind of 40 in all. There's also many perception-based techniques. People start to have many thoughts about things that they're kind of very attached to. They get very conceited when things go well for them. Learn to use the contemplation of impermanence. Wait a minute. This thing arose according to causes and conditions. It's going to fall away. And in this way, one starts to clean up one's mess, and then when new messes come, one gets them out right away. As one continues to do this, one's room becomes a cleaner place. Becomes a nice place to be. Often, remember going to these houses like my kind of great aunts or, whatever, and they were kind of at home all the time. It was their kind of job. They were kind of, they took care of their family, they took care of their kids, and they stayed at home in this generation, and they were really good cleaners. So whenever you went to some of these people's house, their house was like totally spotless. And you're a kid, and then you move out on your own. You're like, how do they keep their house so clean? They kind of learn these techniques. And being in a place like this, being in a house like this that's been kept clean, sometimes I wander around on this kind of underground path. I was actually there a couple of days ago. And if you have a very clean room, even if it's small, everything is well put away, it's well ordered, all the messes are scrubbed out. Sometimes you even take everything out of the room. You wipe down all the walls, you wipe down all the counters, you get rid of all the dust. Even a very small room can be a very pleasant place to be. Very nice place to be. It's comparable to some of these really nice hotel rooms. It's kind of, you've made it very, very clean. When you have a nice clean place like this, when a person's cleaned out their room well, they know the various techniques to clean it, they've learned it, and they know how to keep it clean. New messes come, they keep getting rid of them. Then that becomes a nice place to settle down. This kind of room becomes a nice place to sit in. Room becomes a nice place to sit in like that. A person gets comfortable there. They don't have to wander around there. And then even if there isn't a bunch of sheets being thrown down all over the place, they like being there. This is the kind of same thing with a person's mind. Even as we start to clean out the kind of various messes in our mind, learn the various techniques for keeping them out, learning the various techniques for stopping messes as soon as they arise, the mind becomes a kind of nice place to stay, becomes a nice place to settle down through this kind of effort, this effort to keep it clean. When it becomes a nice place to settle down like this, then silence stops being as scary. This is where the Buddha said, silence, kind of solitude is something very difficult for people to delight in. It's kind of difficult for a person to delight in solitude. And one of the reflections that he has monks do is, am I a person who delights in an empty dwelling? It's one of the kind of euphemisms in the canon. Monks are supposed to reflect on these things often. Am I a person who delights in an empty dwelling? What this kind of empty dwelling means, what it means to delight in an empty dwelling, is actually that a monk is in possession of the kind of fourth jhana. A kind of monk can make their mind go to this fourth jhana, because when a person's room gets clean, their mind gets clean, it becomes a nice place to stay, the mind can settle down. Kind of the same thing, when the mind becomes a clean place, it becomes nice to stay in, and these external forces that press in on it are no longer so threatening. One can go with the flow of them. They know they're taking one to a nicer place. They become less scary. Yeah? So when the teachers teach about this kind of thing, they say when the mind becomes like this, you can learn to follow your breath continuously, stay with it, then these very kind of pleasant feelings arise. These feelings of kind of rapture arise in a person's mind, these feelings of bliss. Kind of the first time a person experiences these feelings of bliss, then it kind of blows their mind. Kind of didn't know that this kind of thing was a possibility. And can be a kind of life-changing event for people. You can see how people who have various religious experiences consider these kind of things a life-changing event. And it's because there are types of happiness that are beyond the usual types of happiness that come from distraction, that come from seeking and eating sensual pleasures. Type of happiness that comes from this cultivation, from the cultivation of the mind. Yeah? But all this comes from learning to sweep the mind out, learning to keep it clean. And when a person has this type of happiness arise in them, then they learn how to develop it. They learn how to keep it. They learn how to make it strong. So the Buddha describes learning to become skilled in the in entering into jhana. He describes learning how to be skilled in the duration of jhana. And he describes learning how to be skilled in the emergence of jhana. In other words, these feelings of bliss, these feelings of pleasure are things that people can master as a skill. It's a skill they can develop. Yeah? Same way a person develops a skill using the various instruments to clean their room. You ever see some people who are professional cleaners? They can go into some of these really dirty places. I remember seeing a guy who was a professional window cleaner. The windows are very hard to clean. You kind of you're sitting there like, okay, here we go. You know, there's all these streaks going. I saw this one guy who was a pro, and he came to visit a monastery where I was living one time, and he had all these rags. I was like, okay, I'm going to watch him. And he had this like technique. He was like, boom, done. Window was done. It was kind of spotless. And of course, I came, you can, okay, I've got my rags, here I go. It's not going to turn out the same way unless a person develops that skill. Same skill that guy had. But in the same way a person can develop these skills in cleaning a window, a person can develop this skill in cleaning their mind. They can get very good at it. Get good at flicking out the bad thoughts. Get good at removing the stains. When a person becomes very good at doing these things, then they become good at what they call the entrance into jhana. Somebody who's good at making their mind go very quickly into this state of jhana. Sometimes a person has to kind of sit there for a long time. Sometimes it's kind of these random events that a person is just sitting, their body feels very calm. Okay, whoa, pleasant feelings have arisen. But when a person becomes skilled at all these various techniques for keeping the mind clean, then they can become skilled at what they call the entrance into jhana. They can do it very fast. Yeah? So they don't have to kind of go through this whole process. So the famous teacher Ajahn Chah, he was very famous for being skilled at the entrance into jhana. He said he could do it on an in-breath. On an in-breath, he could go into these very deep states of concentration where he'd take an in-breath and he would be sitting in the same place for 8 hours and not get up. And then he'd get up at the end of the night and all the monks would have finished their night-long sitting. So then there's the technique of there's the skill in the duration of jhana, learning to make it last. Yeah? So in other words, when these kind of feelings come up, then a person learns not to rush out and grab onto them like they're a kind of candy and eat them. One learns to stay with one's object of focus and keep these feelings going. It's like sometimes when a person is watching like wild animals, like birds or something like that, you see the bird, you get real excited. Whoa, I'm going to go check the bird out. You go rush out to see the bird and it kind of flies away. You want the bird to stay around for a really long time so you get a kind of good sense of what the bird is like. You have to kind of watch it like a little bit out of the corner of your eye. Kind of being very quiet, not kind of rushing out to grab it directly, but just kind of letting it do its thing. And the same way, when a person rushes out to these kind of pleasant feelings, they disappear. There's actually a lot to learn right there about the process of consumption. And then there's also a skill in the emergence of jhana. When people get very good at these things, they can go into jhana. They can stay there for as long as they like, determining what time they're going to leave, kind of jhana. So I'm going to stay here for 3 hours and leave. And then they do. So there was a story about one monk. He was a kind of very respected teacher, and is still alive today. And he told a story about how he was in Thailand and meditating. And he fell into these kind of states of meditation where he learned that he'd go into them and it would seem like hours passed in like a few seconds or minutes. And then he learned he could program himself to come in and out of these states. So he'd be like, all right, I'm going to be in this state for 3 hours, 20 minutes, and 35 seconds. And he'd set his watch and he'd go into it. And he would come out 3 hours, 20 minutes, and 35 seconds later. It was amazing, eh? But these are the kind of benefits that a person gains when they learn to keep their room clean. They learn to develop a love of having a clean room. Even a little bit of blemish on a room that's very clean is noticeable right away. One chip on a room where a person's been continuously keeping it clean, you notice it. Person walks into their room, they've been cleaning it, they know how it looks when it's clean. There's a chip on the counter, whoa, it stands out like a sore thumb, Never mind if a big kind of mess gets spilled. When you see the chip, when a person sees the chip, they love having a clean room. They want to clean it right away. So in other words, it doesn't end up being, the amazing thing about keeping a room clean too, is that if a person does that consistently, like they clean their room every week, it's not like it was the first time when they had to clean it. It's not like taking everything out, scrubbing everything, like a whole 2-3 days of just making everything spotless. If one consistently does this, it stays clean, and the amount of effort that one needs to maintain it is not as much. It's much lower. It's kind of this maintenance level of effort to make that room clean, to keep it clean, so long as one keeps flicking things out. So in the same way, when a person develops this kind of love for keeping their mind clean, develops a desire to learn the various techniques, to become skilled at the ways of keeping bad thoughts at bay. How do I get rid of this thought of anger? Oh, it didn't go away? This time trying this technique, I got to try something different. Oh, wait a minute, the breath was good for getting rid of this feeling of anxiety before. Now I've got it. I'm watching the breath. It's not going away. Why don't I try breathing a different way? How can I breathe so I won't be anxious? Why don't I pose that question in the mind? What parts of my body don't feel anxious? Can I breathe in and out of them? In this way, it's like a kind of skilled cleaner, learning the various ways, the various cleaning techniques, various solutions, chemicals to clean them, the various tools to clean them, and combinations of both. So that when they look at a mess, they know how to clean it. Like the skilled window cleaner. When he looks at a window, he goes up with his rags and booyaka, kind of shiny. So when a person does this, then silence doesn't become something that's scary as much. A person learns to delight in that silence. In the same way, a person who loves the clean room delights in a clean room. The silence is something that pushes the mind even more inwards. And so long as we make inwards a good place to stay, then this silence is something that's beneficial. It pushes our meditation practice forwards, in deeper directions, towards this skill, trying to learn the skill and the emergence of jhana, the duration of jhana, the entering of jhana, the duration of jhana, the emergence of jhana. And there's skills that go even beyond that. So in this way, the Buddha's teachings, they lead onwards, They have these elements to them that are uncomfortable at first, but that grow into something that's very pleasant, It's good starting in this way. It's good starting to clean the room out. It's good cleaning it out a bit. It's good learning the techniques for cleaning it. It's good when it becomes clean and one can live in it. Because when the mind has a nice place to live in, it can settle down into these states of peace. And when the mind has these states of peace to feed on, it doesn't feel threatened by the external things that used to make it scared, losing its external sensual pleasures, its external attachments. It's got something inside that's much more nourishing to feed on. Well, that's, of course, with the middle part of the Buddha's practice, but it goes even further than that, But it's good enough, good enough to keep going with, to find these good states to feed on, to find this silence in the mind, and to try to make it grow.